Hello. We've been expecting you. Like to welcome you to... I have no idea what this show is named, because we're not Thoughts from Aunt Woo, we're not the Crossroads Inn, I don't know. We're talking about Star Wars. I apologize for the Game of Thrones overlay, because I don't actually have an overlay right now, and I'm really lazy, and I didn't bother to create a new one, and whatever. You got it. You get it. So, today, we will be discussing The Phantom Menace, one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, that's not actually true, but it's kind of true. Today on my panel, I have at Grand Moff Cory, his new Twitter name, Cory.
Hi, everyone.
And the Lord himself, Mr. Nick.
Thank you very much, Mark.
So, how's everybody doing today?
I'm good. I've been excited for doing something like this for way over a few years now, so I'm glad that we're able to do it and start this.
I'm doing pretty good, Mark. I'm excited for this. You know, that Game of Thrones, kind of little league compared to this. I think we're going to get some major views for this.
I don't think that's true. But, whatever. We're gonna jump right in. So, if you've watched any or listened to any Thoughts from Aunt Woo content, you know that we like to start things off with an initial thoughts, then discuss episode or, in this case, movie discussion, and then do a final thoughts and a rating. Now, this is a movie, and it's obviously a 2.5-hour movie, but we're not going to be going point by point. I don't think that this movie warrants it, and I think that in general, there's a lot of things that we can kind of just, go through. But we'll talk about things as they come up. On the Game of Thrones show, we kind of tried to talk about each character's story in entirety, but this movie kind of is at least somewhat linear in terms of there really is only one story going on. It's not like a Game of Thrones episode where you have multiple different stories all kind of working in different places. So let's jump right in with our initial thoughts. Nick, why don't you start things off? What do you remember? What are your initial thoughts on The Phantom Menace, the first in the new set of Star Wars movies to come out?
Well, Mark, it's a very complicated question because as much as I know that these are bad movies, I still have some very warm memories of them. Given, the age I first saw them, what I associate them with. And the fact that they introduced so much, even though, as movies, especially in terms of, the dialogue and a lot of directing issues, they really struggled, but they were fun for me. So, it's complicated. It's love-hate. It's not all bad for me.
Fair enough. Cory, how are you wrong about this one?
I had the opposite. So as a kid, I saw these in theaters too, and I hated them. I remember during the Phantom Menace in the theater, I was running up and down the theater. I barely paid attention. I absorbed what I was watching. I always walked out of the theater knowing pod racing and obviously Darth Maul and what the ships looked like and all that. But when I was younger, I did not like the prequels, and I always had the impression that the prequels were not just bad, but ruined Star Wars. And now that I'm an adult and I could analyze things critically and really go over things with a fine comb, and being that this last 8 months of my life I've been obsessed with Star Wars, reading a lot of say the extended universe stuff, watching the Clone Wars, reading a lot of the books, I have to appreciate what the prequels did for world building. And I have to agree, there are serious problems that are in the prequels in terms of writing and direction. But I feel especially The Phantom Menace is something where I could say, if you took two things out of it, you would improve the movie by, if we're going out of the 10-point scale, you would improve the movies by 4 points if you took 2 points out of this. I think Jar Jar and just the direction of kid actors ruined The Phantom Menace, because there were so many scenes where if you just took Jar Jar out, and this is not me memeing or making a joke, it would be a lot better. There were so many useless scenes with comedy relief using Jar Jar, and then it's the kid actors on Tatooine, including Anakin, that just derailed every scene while they were in it. And it's a shame, because I feel The Phantom Menace can go up a lot of points. I think The Phantom Menace was flawless in music direction. I think it's one of the best Star Wars movies in terms of music scores. And then the visuals are very nice. Naboo is awesome to see, especially coming out of the original trilogy. And like even seeing Tatooine in like it's different light. And they just gave us so much variety. So I feel like the Phantom Menace there's a lot of diamonds scattered throughout like a pile of shit, pretty much.
So I'm much more on the Nick camp in terms of when I first saw this. Now, I'll be honest, this is the first Star Wars movie I ever saw. I did not see them in release order. I didn't actually see the Star Wars until I was a little bit older. Not like old, but like, a little bit older. So for me, the prequels were kind of the first Star Wars movies that I saw, and at the time I thought, oh, these are like they're good. They're kind of they're funny. They've got really cool action. They got great visuals. And then I saw the originals, and as a little kid, I was like, wow, these are good, but like they don't look really great, and whatever. And then I got older and started to realize, hey, wait, no, that's not how you should be judging movies. Yes, of course, the CGI looks a lot better in the prequels because they're newer, but for the most part, the actual everything else about the original trilogy is so much better. And looking at what Cory said, like now going through this with a fine-tooth comb, everything about this movie like fails for me. And I don't mean that in like the completely negative light of like you should never watch this because it's just like everything is awful. It's just, to me, everything about this movie screams it could have been better and should have been better. And like Cory isn't wrong that there are some real like good things under here. Like I think Ewan McGregor's performance as Obi-Wan Kenobi, and this is true throughout the entire prequels, is really good. I think that the visuals work. I think that Cory's completely right about the music and the sound is excellent. But overall, like I think that there are some interesting things going on here. That being said, everything about this movie to me is just like I think that like I just kind of feel like there's no direction. This feels like a first draft to me. This feels like a first draft, and then you go through and go, wait, no, that we don't need that. Cory's right, yeah, get rid of Jar Jar, and that would move up the Gungans entirely, and that would move up the story in a major way. But like that to me seems so obvious. Like I don't see how someone didn't go like, guys, this is ridiculous. Like one scene
because it's not guys. Nobody spoke up to George Lucas.
But that's not a good enough. Then this is a problem. Then you've proven to me that everyone involved in this movie, because you can harp on Lucas all you want. You're right. Lucas deserves a lot of blame for this, but like this is a multi-million-dollar movie. This is not like a passion project that was made in which like one guy funded it and yeah, he had all the power. Like there were people at Fox who could have easily said, this isn't right, we need to fix this, and they didn't do it. And it's just so frustrating because like I really enjoy, like the original trilogy is so good, and the new movies that are coming out are really good. There's a lot of really good Star Wars stuff out there, and it's just so sad to me that this set of movies is always going to be there as like this, oh yeah, that's what happens when things go horribly wrong. Now it's not Attack of the Clones. It's not as bad as Episode 2, which I think is just really really atrocious. There are things to like here. But for the most part, there's a lot of stuff that I can't understand how these things got through without someone looking at it. So I guess we'll kind of get into our episode discussion, and I don't know. I haven't kind of exactly figured out how we're going to do this. I'm going to kind of go on the fly because I'm not going scene by scene. There's just no real way to do that. But I think the first thing I want to talk about is like, I feel like this movie starts out when you have the Trade Federation and the Viceroy talking about the Jedi. Like, why is it that people continue to underestimate Jedi? It just seems so like counterintuitive to me, especially watching other things like watching Clone Wars and just watching the prequels in general, where Jedi are clearly pretty ubiquitous. They're not like in the original trilogy where there's 3 of them and whatever, and most people have an encounter. It seems to me like very obvious that the Viceroy is like completely underestimating the Jedi, and I don't understand why that's even possible. Because
the Viceroy don't deal with Jedi. At this, like, the thing is, they are just traitors that are usually dealing in the Outer Rim and stuff. At this point, when there was no Clone Wars, the Jedi were just regular peacekeepers that were in Coruscant, and there are other Jedi worlds. So this is a part, I think, of the Star Wars mythos where they've never dealt with Jedi before. They've heard of them. There's reputation, obviously, but they didn't know how good. You would think that like an entire army of battle droids on your own ship can take out 2 Jedi. Like, that makes sense to me.
But I could kind of understand it in terms of just character building. Just for the kinds of people these guys are, just very secular, economically oriented, and they've kind of established, the galaxy is a huge place, and a lot of people just don't interact with each other. However, I assume you're specifically talking about the gas scene. Yeah, that was a little, yeah.
I guess to me the problem I have with it is that this world that they're building, especially in the prequels, seesaws a lot between original trilogy, where Jedi are kind of these mythical, legendary, people aren't really entirely sure about them, and then we kind of swing to the prequel side of like they're trade negotiators sent by the Senate. And I'm not necessarily upset about both interpretations, but I feel like you kind of need to pick one for each time. And if you want the Jedi to be, because it just feels to me like the Jedi are really ubiquitous throughout the prequels. Like, people seem to know them, people seem to know what they're talking about, people seem to understand that like a Jedi is a Jedi. And the Trade Federation has a delegate in the Senate. It's not like the Trade Federation is like this thing off thousands of miles away that light years away that's never done. Like, it seems to me like they should have some reasonable understanding of like, these are 2 Jedi Knights, they're gonna be kind of difficult to take down, because it's not like the droids pose any threat to them.
Well, the lore dictates that they aren't mythical at this point, but I think we still see, even in the same movie, like on Tatooine, there's still like at least Anakin's reaction to the characters. They're not exactly.
Child and a slave.
Yeah, of course.
They build, like, you have like Watto, like he kind of knows what a Jedi mind trick might be. I don't know.
That's true.
It just feels to me like they're like at the start of this movie, they know that we're used to a world where there's 2 Jedi. There's 1 Jedi, and now we're entering a world where there's tons, and I'm just not sure that they were ready to understand how that would mean moving forward into the later stages. Because like this moment, then we go into like, oh no, Jedi are just everywhere. They're just a part of this world.
To be fair, Jabba also knew about Jedi tricks.
Yes, but Jabba's also the leader of a
He's been around a while,
and
but
the Hutts are really powerful. There's a lot of stuff.
So, and I mean, that's the thing. You can regard some of these characters in the same way.
Yeah.
I just get annoyed because this here sets the precedent for the entire prequels, is that battle droids are absolutely useless. So I feel like every time you see a battle droid, you know that no Jedi, or forget about Jedi, main characters, and have an issue getting through them because they're useless. And I always thought that just took out the tone of every single battle in all of the prequels, knowing that the droids are useless, and it just, watching it visually is so boring, because they not only do they get cut down all the time, there's no challenge to cutting them down at all.
Well, they don't want to commit to slaughtering hundreds of people, because that's not the Jedi way, but they want to have these like acrobatic, we want to see the Jedi in action, so the only way to do that is have them destroy machines. And I agree with you. I think that I really get annoyed about the way battle droids are, and like I think that that's a problem throughout the entirety of Star Wars, including like Clone Wars, where it's like I wish that they were at least decent. I'll give them this. They did a good job of making the destroyers look cool and kind of look like they were actually a bit of a threat, even though they're not really. They just happen to have a ray shield. But like, I agree. I think that that also feels weird, where it's like there's no dramatic tension behind battle droids whatsoever.
Were we going to talk more about the opening scene?
No, we can. What else? You have things you want to say?
Well, just in general, I wanted to say that the opening scene is, in a few ways, a microcosm of the prequels in general. Because, you have them, landing on the Viceroy's ship, and they're introducing a lot of new a whole new universe. Basically, we get to see a lot of new stuff in the Star Wars universe. But one of the things that, and it's I don't have a whole lot of criticism for the opening in general, but we start to see some of the, I guess, directing issues that, especially in the first two movies, where a lot of the movies is comprised of these rolling action shots that they're going from point A to point B constantly, and it's and it's just laden with action and some really simple short dialogue traded between the main characters, and it's like it's a little clunky, I guess. It's I can't remember specifically, but I'm pretty sure there's a few questionable lines thrown in there.
Well, there's a lot of like little quips back and forth because they're kind of fighting. But I think it gets compounded on what Cory was saying, where it's like the fighting is so incidental because we know there's absolutely no threat to them whatsoever, that it's like this weird combination of like trying to be an action scene, but there's not really any exciting action, and
it's like filler action.
Yeah.
But like, to be fair, let's think back to the original trilogy. Stormtroopers were pretty useless themselves. They weren't like as obvious because they were more menacing, because droids are just like comic relief. Also, they're like Roger, like. So I think it's more obvious with the droids, but the Stormtroopers were pretty useless in their own right.
But how many scenes did you have where it just felt like there were a bunch of Stormtroopers on screen to get cut down by the heroes and pose no threat?
No, you're right. The at least like Han, Leia, Luke were always fighting on the back foot.
And we can meme about like Stormtrooper aim and the silliness of like the way some of the scenes were shot in A New Hope. But to me, I kind of chalked that up to like, you know what, you didn't have the tools to create the most like. They're just some things where the shots are a little bit clunky, but like narratively, I always felt like the Stormtroopers provided a significantly greater threat. And then by the time Luke was sort of at a level where it wouldn't matter anymore, we don't see like how many Stormtroopers are in Return of the Jedi? Like very few.
Oh, there's Endor and
but I think they're not anywhere near Luke.
Right, exactly. Here's what I'll say. One of the things that I think it was just the worst in, this is my opinion anyway, it was worst in the first movie. They kind of corrected it in the later two, was that the action felt kind of almost, there wasn't much weight to it. And one of the big criticisms, which we could get into later, was, it was almost over choreographed action.
I don't harp on the choreography. I actually like it in some cases. Because I like the Maul fight, even though I know some people get on it like it's very perfect.
I think in terms of having a visually stunning fight, I think the third movie was the one that got the formula right there. I think it was just a little too. It didn't feel like there was a whole lot of weight behind some of these action scenes.
I agree, and I think that, like I said, to me it's the worst with the droids, because it's like. It seems like they're like exporting no effort whatsoever, but there's still like a lot of flips and
It almost feels like they're not there when you watch these scenes.
Well, wonder why.
But yeah, well, yes, but that's their job to give them some presence and weight.
Yeah, no.
That's another criticism of the prequels, and it's so noticeable. More so, it's always been noticeable, and it's always been a criticism, but. More so now with Force Awakens, that pure CGI movies, like what the prequels were, are so sterile, and like your eye, even when those graphics were like, this is 1999, and like the early 2000s, and like, a lot of movies were like this, there's such a difference seeing the gritty dirtiness of like a Star Wars movie when you're using practical sets, and you're actually out in the field, versus how sterile it feels in the prequels, and like,
it's more than that too, though, because to me it's even more of like, you can tell when actors are reacting to something that's real compared to when they're reacting to something that isn't. Like I think that especially the early ones, like there are some really great scenes in like Harry Potter where you can tell that they're interacting with something that's at least somewhat practical compared to just like, okay, let's just fill in everything with a bunch of CGI. And I'm not a there can be no CGI. There's a place for it. There are times when it works really well. But I think that when you have actors interacting with something, that's where it gets it becomes even more noticeable, because it's like we know that they're not actually slicing through a bunch of droids. Like, we know that that's all just CGI'd in, and it makes it so that it doesn't look. It adds, or it takes away that weight, because it's like you can tell the actors aren't really interacting with anything.
Yeah, makes sense. 15 years, Force Awakens might not look that good, though.
No, it's not even about. It's like, you know what? I actually argue that, because some of my favorite movies of sci-fi of all time, like Star Trek, is like a perfect example, where like Star Trek Wrath of Khan was filmed in the late 70s, and it was all obviously practical sets. They used models, and it looks phenomenal by 2017 standards. If you use the right combination of practical models, and right now in 2017, where you mix it up with like green screen stuff, you have, I think, timeless graphics that can't look bad. Like the original New Hope, like the entire Death Star was all like practical timed explosions, and it still, in my opinion, looks great by today's standards.
But Force Awakens wasn't all practical.
Yeah, I think Force Awakens used a great hybrid of both.
I don't want to get too sidetracked, but one that sticks out to me was that monster scene on the Millennium Falcon. That might not look too good in a little bit.
No, but I think that was probably also one of the worst scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We can
yeah. So there is a line I want to like really key in on here from either Padme or fake Padme. I don't know. I can't keep track of Natalie Portman and Keira Knightley here. But like, they're being invaded, and she has a line of, "I will not condone an action that will lead us to war." And it's like, they're invading you. That time has passed. Like, there is no action that will not lead to war, or you're being invaded. I found that line really silly.
I think she just doesn't want to be the queen that declares war. I think she wants to try to find a peaceful solution still. It does make sense. You don't want to be that queen.
I understand what she's actually saying, though. It felt really weird and out of place as to like they're like, well, we need to prepare our defenses, and she's like, well, no, I don't want to lead us to war. It's like they're invading you. They've brought the war. To quote,
I hate the fake queen. I hate her as an actress.
What's wrong with Keira Knightley as a human being?
It's just like, why, if you're George or whoever made these creative decisions, like, why would you say to them, I want you to be as stale, monotone, and I just don't get that direction at all.
Can we just discuss the entirety of the whole fake queen thing? Because the only thing I feel like it's there for is because he wanted to have a reveal of, no, I'm the queen. Like, I don't get it at all.
Well, what don't you get?
Why this was necessary.
She was a decoy.
Yeah, I know. Why does she need a decoy?
From the storytelling perspective.
Well, also, no, not even. She's not that safe. Like, I remember even, this is far ahead. She's always trying to get, executed.
But in episode 2, the whole decoy thing kind of makes sense. We know there's a plot on her life. She's getting off the ship. Have someone dress up like her so that the attacker attacks them and not the actual senator. That's fine. That's a specific situation. But to have a decoy as a queen for basically the entirety of the movie. What at that point, for all intents and purposes, the fake queen is the queen. What's the point? I just don't, especially considering she's the handmaiden's next to her. It's not like they're that far away from each other. I just don't understand why within this story they thought to themselves, let's not have the queen be the queen right now.
I think, it was for the reveal. It was so they can have an excuse for Padme to go out with them on Tatooine and meet Anakin, and if you knew Padme was the queen, she would have went Qui-Gon never would have let her come along with them on Tatooine, and I
guess, but
it's more of writing yourself into a corner.
I guess she probably shouldn't have been on Tatooine either, regardless. But to me, I just don't understand it. Especially considering they don't. It seems to me like they know the situation is a lot worse than they seem to then say that it is. Like, if you're going to go through all of this trouble to have a decoy set up and a fake queen, like, then you should, like, it feels like they should know that this invasion is going to be a serious disaster, and then they should have been more prepared for it. But it seems like they're kind of taken by surprise, but it also seems like they're really prepared. And I guess the reason it really gets to me is because it seems like the fake queen makes a lot of decisions.
Yeah, I can understand being.
I feel like Padme is the one that's like giving the fake queen all these orders, though.
Right, but
But
I'm not too bothered by it. I guess you could see it almost as though Lucas kind of likes these details for the sake of details. Like the fact that it kind of makes sense. But that's the thing. You could see every political leader have their own decoy at that point. So. But I think it was just a kind of a fix for to make other things work more naturally, even though it seems very strange.
Yeah, I don't know. So we have the introduction of R2. You guys, how do you guys?
Now this is something that bothers me.
Yeah.
There were just droids on the ship.
Yep.
At that point, before they got attacked and the droids went out to repair the ship, they were just regular droids.
Yep.
No one even batted an eye to them. R2 was nothing before this. Then all the other two droids died. R2 repaired the ship. They acted shocked that R2 was able to repair the ship. And then the queen, or the fake queen, was like, who is this droid? What is their serial number? Like, that's like complimenting your toaster for making you toast.
Fan service.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
They really wanted R2 in these movies, and this was a way.
No, and it's fine to have R2 in these movies, and I think everything could have went on normally if the Queen didn't have a scene where it complimented R2 and like, you did very well, young R2D2. Like, it's not just a random droid on your ship. Like, if they could have had R2 there, survive, fix the ship. Wow, that R2 unit fixed the ship. Warp the Tatooine, and nothing. Like, why did the Queen have to compliment R2?
Because they wanted that they needed someone complimenting R2D2 because they needed that reveal that is actually R2D2.
These are just the little things, man. Like that, like really, like can like put like the threads that you can pull that like eventually will tear it apart. And like we've ignored completely when we were in the opening. By the way, the whole Jar Jar Gundam scenes, like when they go to the kingdom and go to the planet core. I'm not saying.
I have nothing positive to say about that.
But that's like this is the shit I'm like talking about, where like there's so many little tiny things that make you cringe, and like it reveals like when you watch a movie, you're supposed to be so enveloped in the movie where if there are plot holes, hopefully your brain doesn't ask them because you're so engrossed in the movie. But then these little things, when you see like Jar Jar like just like randomly like trip on his own feet and like piss off Qui-Gon, and like when they were on Tatooine at dinner, he would just like randomly stick his tongue out, or like when oh my god, it's whatever. These are the things that make you sit back and look at the other things, like the R2 getting crowned by a queen moment, and actually question it because you're so always out of the movie.
So you're absolutely right, but I could defend this now because this extent of fan service compared to like say. Star Wars today or any Disney Marvel movie, it's almost tasteful in my opinion. So, but like, I almost don't even care.
It's funny. I don't agree. I think it's more let's go to fan service nowadays. Let's go to like Rogue One.
It gets really bad. Like
I don't agree with you guys. I think it's done more tastefully now.
The Stan Lee cameos have gotten to a point of like, okay, we get it. He's Stan Lee. Enough.
But let's talk about like today's Star Wars fan service. In Rogue One, you had the two people that were in the Tatooine bar in New Hope walk by. And that was the scene. They were like, "Hey, get over here," and they just kept walking. That was it.
CGI Tarkin, CGI Leia.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Nothing was wrong.
Scenes. Come on.
Tarkin was needed in Rogue. Well, first of all, we can't talk about Rogue One right now, but. Just talking about that fan service.
No, the reason we can't is because
Tarkin was needed because Tarkin became the commander of the freaking Death Star in New Hope.
Yeah,
like
you didn't need CGI on Guinness. You could have just.
He looked fine. He didn't look as bad as people say he did. The acting, the voice acting was phenomenal.
But if you want the really bad fan service, Force Awakens, and I like Force Awakens a lot, but there was some awful of it. Like just having to do the stupid line about the garbage about the Millennium Falcon, and then of course immediately they get on the Millennium Falcon, and Han and Chewie show up. It's like they're on the ship. Like that was really, really upset. Like,
but to be fair, like Star Wars is all about this, like, wow, thank God this happened, and this person was in the right place, and this is all throughout Star Wars.
Right, but that's why I think it wasn't that big of a deal in the.
But that's why, like, this is like in Phantom Menace, it's just a scene that makes no sense. Because, like, at least in Force Awakens, like, everything is just moving along the way the plot's supposed to move. There was no, like, random scene where, like, I don't know. This is a scene.
I think that to some degree the problem that you're seeing here, Cory, and I think this is a problem throughout all of Star Wars, not just the prequels, but all of Star Wars, is that I don't think they've ever really given us a good enough explanation as to what droids actually are and like how much consciousness they actually have. Because if you look at R2 as just like his job was to go out there and fix the ship because that's what the droids are on the ship for, then it's like, well, then why are you complimenting this droid? As you said, why are you complimenting your toaster for making you toast? Like the ship, the repair droid repaired, great. But if you think of if droids are instead more like people who, you know, kind of have skill sets and kind of develop more consciousness, which obviously we kind of know R2 does, it then becomes a little bit more reasonable to be like, oh, well, you should, you know, commend this droid because he went above and beyond the call of duty or something. It is problematic, and it's something that I think Star Wars suffers from throughout the entirety of the series as to like how much consciousness and how alive are droids actually.
Very fair, and you do see that in a lot of even like the extended universe stuff, or like even like in like the Clone Wars cartoon, like battle droids like get fear and like emotional. Like my favorite scene ever in like the Clone Wars cartoon was like where there's this commander who was betrayed by one of the viceroys, and like the droid was like, "How could you, sir?" Like they have like self-preservation. They do have personalities. Like even like in like, you know, Rogue One, K2SO has his own like personality, and like you were supposed to feel something when he died. So you're right. That is a very fair counterpoint.
So I have to say, I'll just say this. I know we can all say this, but why was Jar Jar on Tatooine? Nothing about this makes any sense. Right down to the fact that his body shouldn't even be able to survive. Like, he's an underwater creature and he's in a desert. He should be dead. What was Qui-Gon possibly thinking to be like, you should come with me to Tatooine? That's going to solve these problems.
I hate Jar Jar so much, and like it's impossible to talk about Phantom Menace without Jar Jar because he's everywhere. You're right. Why does Qui-Gon? And Qui-Gon is obviously a Jedi with little patience. He does have a temper on him. He is definitely more of the gray, questionable, like, you know, morally gray Jedi. And obviously he gets frustrated by Jar Jar. It makes more sense for like someone like Obi-Wan to say like, "Hey, you can come with me," and Obi-Wan that goes out with them, and like. It's just, I don't get... Jar Jar's purpose should have ended on Naboo. He should have, even if that, he should have helped them get over to the Queen, and then, alright, thanks Jar Jar, go away now. Like... All right.
So before this becomes into just a pure Jar Jar meme fest, because we all can agree Jar Jar's terrible, a question I want to ask about the entirety of the Tatooine situation. Do you think that it was the right choice for Qui-Gon to be the one to discover Anakin and not Obi-Wan? And I know within the movie itself, it had to be Qui-Gon. But in terms of the overall canon of Star Wars, from if you ignore Phantom Menace, Episode 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and we look at the Anakin-Obi-Wan relationship, do you think that it was the right decision for someone other than Obi-Wan to discover Anakin?
That's a great question. I actually agree. I actually think that it definitely. You're right. It could have been Obi-Wan, and it would have made a lot of sense. I see what they were going for, though. They were going for Obi-Wan. By the end of Phantom Menace, did not want to train Anakin at all. He wanted to listen to the council. and it was Qui-Gon's dying words to Obi-Wan, train the boy, and that I think made it good because it was now Obi-Wan trying to fulfill something to his master who died in his arms. So from the way they handled it, I think they handled it well, but I would have enjoyed it just as much if Obi-Wan from the start wanted to train Anakin.
Yeah, I think it's acceptable because Obi-Wan inherited Qui-Gon's decision effectively. So,
for me, the way I see it is I think that within Phantom Menace, it's a lot better for Qui-Gon to be the one to discover Anakin. I think it works better within this movie where you have this really great final scene and it sets up this thing with Obi-Wan to sort of start out, where is he? And by the end, he's sort of inheriting this decision and forced to internalize it. But I think that as soon as we get into episode 2 and we move on with the sort of building up and then desolation of the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan, I think that it kind of, this is where I feel like it actually would have been better if it was Obi-Wan, because to me the entirety of Anakin's fall throughout episode 3 is a lot of him realizing that he's a slave to the Jedi Order, that he is kind of forced to do the Council's bidding even if he disagrees with it, and 2, that he is enslaved by this code that's preventing him from living the life that he wants with his wife and learning the things he needs to learn in order to potentially save his wife. And for me, part of that would have been really there would have been something really great about the relationship of being Obi-Wan being the one to take him from slavery, and then him to discover that actually no, Obi-Wan is still, who's called his master, is still kind of enslaved him, and he breaks those shackles in order to sort of become who he feels he needs to be. And I think that would have been a very poetic part of this that is lost in the Qui-Gon being the one. Like I said, I think in this movie, and in order to make this movie work, it's better to be Qui-Gon, but I think in the overall Star Wars canon, it would have been better if it was Obi-Wan.
That's fair. Both work, and I agree. In terms of Phantom Menace, I think it works better with Qui-Gon. But there's like a lot of things like I would have preferred going, because like it's funny, everyone says it, and it makes sense to an extent. In the movies, and if you just count the movies alone, Phantom Menace is like one of those movies where you can just take away. It changes nothing. Like there's nothing important really in the Phantom Menace. So like there's a lot of things like I wish they would change just to make Phantom Menace more of a big deal. Like everyone says, like I wish Maul survived, and Maul was the big antagonist leading pretty much up to
we'll get to Maul. I don't
yeah, but then there's that. There's like I kind of like a lot of things with like you wish at least this gives Qui-Gon some type of lasting effect. I think Qui-Gon's again one of the highlights of the prequels, and his relationship with Obi-Wan especially.
So another thing I want to talk about, and again this is kind of more of a Star Wars canon in general, or at least prequels plus Clone Wars. There are times where I'm a little bit like, I feel like the Jedi can get a little bit too confident in terms of like, it's all going to work out. And it kind of bothers me. Like, Qui-Gon kind of bothered me where, like, it seems like they're in a lot of trouble and he just goes to Obi-Wan, like, another opportunity will present itself. And then it just does. Like, I understand why, and I understand, like, obviously they have some ability to see the future, and, like, their confidence also comes from, like, they're the biggest kids on the block, the Sith are gone, so it's easy for them to be confident. But there are times where it almost feels like, wow, like, they have no worries whatsoever, and then their worries just kind of melt away because it just all works out very quickly. Do you guys feel that a little bit?
No. Again, we exist in a universe, and this again goes to everything, not just the prequels, where the Force always is like the Deus Ex Machina. Everything's gonna be okay. So if like the quote unquote Force is on your side, you're gonna make it through your situation. And in terms of like big picture things, them making it through the pod race and getting the part, making it off the planet with Anakin was very small potatoes and compared to what other impossible things that main characters have made it through.
Well, my problem is less the fact that they won the pod race and that all worked out. It's more like the fact that Qui-Gon is like completely confident that that's all going to happen before they've even like figured out that the pod race is a thing. Like, there are times when it just seems like they're a little bit too, like they buy into their own hype a little bit.
But I like it because it show that's what Jedi are to me. How they could stay calm. They were like this since the opening scene of the movie. Every time something went wrong, Qui-Gon was always calm, collected, made it through it. Especially when they were getting attacked on the ship in the opening scene, he was calm. When they were going through the planet core and getting attacked by the super giant fish thing, he was calm. When they were under attack by the Trade Federation before they left, I really like that about Qui-Gon and just the Jedi as a whole.
There's calm in the face of battle, and then there's like, well, we have no money and we need parts for a ship, but don't worry, we'll just like hang out in Tatooine and eventually we'll find a way.
Yeah, the tension in the movie did suffer some, but on one hand, people are going into these movies knowing somewhat how this is all going to unfold, vaguely. And I think, particularly in the prequels, Lucas did a lot of like lore-driven directing, where he really wanted to showcase the Jedi as the stoic warriors they were supposed to be.
But I'll say this on that terms, I think that this is the movie that has had the most freedom in which people don't know where they're going, because like once we get to, especially 3, obviously, because like that's the one where we know exactly what's going to happen. Anakin needs to become Vader, but like I feel like Phantom Menace was the one that they had the most like, well, I didn't know where this movie was going to go based on the original trilogy. There's no real like, I feel like this is the first one that has that, the one that has the most ability, and I feel like that he still fell into this trap of like, well, we just need to get to there to set up the original trilogy.
Yeah, for a lot of the rolling action Jedi versus droid scenes, there wasn't any tension at all. But I didn't think the pod race suffered at all.
No, I said my problem is not the pod race. I think the pod race is really good. It's like the moments before the pod race. Like I feel like if you would just move the conversation that Qui-Gon had with Obi-Wan about like another opportunity will prevent itself. Like just like one scene later, I don't even bat an eye at it. It's like, okay, they've figured out that there's like at least this, they have some kind of plan in motion, but it's like there's no plan whatsoever, and he's still just like, don't worry, we'll just kind of figure it out.
It's a fair criticism. It just seems to
especially
be
while people are dying on Naboo.
Right. It's a theme they really wanted to hit us over the head with. But I do have to add in that it is always amusing to me, the idea of a Jedi betting on a child's freedom.
Well, that's it. Let's So I want to talk about it. So the fact that Anakin is Jesus. Is this like, how do we feel about this?
Could you repeat that, Mark?
The fact
cut off for a sec.
The fact that Anakin is Jesus. How do we feel about this?
Oh, Jesus?
He's actually Jesus. He had he's a virgin birth. He has no father.
No, you're gonna be mad, and you're gonna and I have no merit in saying. And these are like the things that like when people review movies, other people get mad at. In the extended, when I say the extended universe, in the books, they explain it away. The books I'm talking about are no longer canon since Disney bought it out, but they tried to explain it. Basically, the way it used to be explained was Darth Plagueis prevented death back when he was a Sith, and the Force recoils, and it's like almost like a give and take. It's like the Force balances itself out, and the Force itself, Anakin's birth was as a direct result of Plagueis cheating death, and that's why he was born. Now, we're talking about a movie. It's a standalone. So you're saying to me, Cory, that doesn't matter. But I'm just saying to you... No,
that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying does it make sense that this is the case. I am saying, do you think that making the...
I think it's
one
completely idiotic.
Of all of Star Wars, Jesus Christ.
I hate...
That's what it is.
When Qui-Gon asked the mom who's the father, and she said there is no father, I cringed. I'm sure... In 1999, everyone that was our age that grew up on Star Wars cringed. And you know what I think is really stupid too? I'm not sure if anyone really notices. Then that Anakin Skywalker is still Anakin Skywalker. That would mean the mom's last name is Skywalker. That would mean some random slave on Tatooine has a really interesting last name for someone who's a random slave on Skywalker on Tatooine. So like, it's like stupid on many fronts. I think.
Feel like it didn't need to. Like I'm okay. Like I like even the whole backstory of like Plagueis, cheating death and all that. That's like a really like that's kind of cool. And there's the death, only death can pay for life thing. That's a very common balance thing. That's fine. Like that doesn't even harp on me. But I just feel like specifically going with the Christ allegory is just like, to me, it's just very lazy. And like, it's like, oh, obviously he's the chosen one. Of course, he has no father. His mother is a virgin. It's perfect. And like, I just wish that wasn't like, I just feel that that's not necessary. Especially, and I'll say this again, as a atheist Jew, you also just took Jesus and you turned him into like a brutal, murderous killer. Just saying. I mean, no one ever. But I just really wish that like you just didn't need it. That's the kind of thing that like would been fine in the extended universe as like this whole exploration of Anakin's past. Great, go do that in the extended universe. That's really good. The people who want it's great. But I just feel like that one line is just so silly to me.
And while we're at it, while we're talking about things that do we have to tell it like this, like do we have to see Anakin as an 8-year-old child? And you know what? It's okay to see, because this is Darth Vader we're talking about, and this is your first time, like when you heard Anakin Skywalker in New Hope and like the original trilogy, you thought of like a noble knight, like a Jedi knight who was like blah blah blah, and then you see the way Anakin is portrayed in Phantom Menace, where he's a kid, and every kid that says yippee and like it almost ruins Darth Vader as a whole, seeing Anakin like this. I don't mind seeing Anakin as an 8-year-old. I mind seeing Anakin as like an every kid 8-year-old. I would have been a lot happier if you saw Anakin as an 8-year-old slave, but miserable, like being abused by Watto, and like his home life is bad. Like obviously, and like you just see him sad, miserable. He responds in one-liners, blah 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 blah. But instead, he's a happy-go-lucky, like every kid that you would see in any movie. And I forget about how bad the kid actor is. Like that's another story completely. But like, it's just it would make more sense for Anakin's character if he was miserable at a young age because of how horrible his life has been. But you don't see that.
It is kind of funny that Anakin's happiest in the entirety of the Star Wars canon is while he's a slave, and then as soon as he's not, he becomes this brooding. But I also kind of understand that as like, even though he's a slave and even though he resents not having freedom, he has his mother. And not to go into like a full discussion that could get me in a lot of trouble here, but like as a slave, he seems to have a reasonably decent life.
Everyone does. That's why it's so stupid. Like the other kids, like there was like that scene where he's building the pod racer, and like all those kids, it seems like they were at like school, like a school ground.
It's very clear that they didn't want to commit to the horrors of slavery thing.
And it's so funny, Mark, because in the Clone Wars cartoon, they did that.
Oh, they did, and it's much better. I agree.
It's like crazy to me how in the cartoon, which is arguably more for kids, they committed to like how dark slavery could be.
Like in all honesty, if you just took away the statements of Anakin being a slave, would you know that he was a slave?
No. Oh no, absolutely
not. I don't think there's any way that you would. He seems to have a house. His mother seems to live there.
You know what the screwed up part is? You could have told the exact story if you did it in a darker way, but better, because you could have still had him like, let's say he got hit and he came home and like he was miserable and like blah blah blah. Then the mom came and comforted him and healed the wounds, and whatever scraps they had made him. You could have told the exact story of him loving his mother and just having him have a miserable childhood. And there's all the dark side foundation you need for someone like Darth Vader, and it makes sense for someone like Darth Vader to want to be a part of the Empire, where the Empire is like order in something like this. Where like everything could have made this so much more sense if Anakin wasn't treated like this.
There is some evidence that the Empire might have ended slavery.
No, there is evidence that that was one of the first things the Empire did. Was get rid of not only the CIS, but they got rid of these gang lords and and slavers, and that was what Tarkin did. Funny enough, the whole Tarkin doctrine was him ending piracy and slavery. Like it's pretty.
Really, when you think about it, they did nothing wrong.
I'm a big supporter of the Galactic Empire. If you guys need any.
Well, they did blow up a planet. But...
Yeah.
Well, you know,
whoa,
if the rebels weren't being the rebels, that never would have happened.
That's true.
All right, I could quickly add on. I wasn't too bothered by the whole Jesus thing because it wasn't that kind of big of a part of the movie. But Lucas really likes to, allude to these big thematic, like his whole idea for the original series was the epic story of the legendary hero and so on and so forth. It's not that surprising, but it was a bit cringy just as a line in itself. And then the other point was what we were talking about, Anakin's childhood. I don't know if I remembered him as happy, but he was a little painfully generic. Like, there wasn't really anything notable.
He was good
about
at
his
building
character.
things.
Right.
Decent pilot, although
forget about all the memes, like the "Are you an angel?" And, like, fine, all right, that's shitty lines. Like you could have told those exact. You know what's funny? If you told those exact lines, like you see him like having a hard day's work, his hands are bloody, blah blah blah, and then like Padme walks in and he looks up to Padme and he said the exact thing. Are you an angel? But he said it in like a more mopey, like sad, but like that would have actually made it better still. Like, there's so much, it's just about the tone. There's so much you could have fixed just by changing the tone where, like, it's, like, it is what it is.
There are a lot of tone problems in this movie where it kind of, like, hints at being dark and then, gets really, really silly comedic.
And, like, while we're on, just on topic here, I really like Qui-Gon on Tatooine, because Qui-Gon is like a Jedi we never see before and we never see again, where
well, you can't say never seen before. We've seen one or two Jedi in the entirety before Qui-Gon.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like a Jedi characterization we have never seen before, where like he's willing to cheat, he's willing to like use Jedi mind tricks.
That's the question I want to ask. When you're cheating a cheater, is it still cheating?
Yes, but it's funny.
It is?
Quote unquote. But here's the thing: is Watto? I said it right. Yeah, is Watto a cheater?
I've always believed that those were loaded dice.
But like, if the thing is, if it was loaded dice, Watto would have been like, "That shouldn't have happened. You use the Force," because he knows
there's got to be an answer to this question.
But he can't admit to the fact that he was trying to cheat him. His reaction seems to come up as like, wait, that wasn't supposed to happen.
We have no evidence that he's cheated at all, ever, actually, since the beginning. In the beginning, he gets introduced to him. They want the part. How are you going to pay for the part? Republic credits. No, we don't take Republic credits here. Uses tries to use Jedi mind trick. Doesn't work. Hey, that doesn't work on me. That's that. Then, like, the next time you see him is setting up for the races. You've never seen him cheat, actually.
Well, I mean, it's not 100% confirmed, but I've always believed that that chance cube, the way he says it and the way he reacts to it coming up the wrong way, is he knows it's going to come up a certain way. That it was weighted, but he can't then turn to Qui-Gon and be like, "You cheated me. These were cheating dice." Like, that seems, I don't know. I mean, you could if it's not, then you can say, is it right that Qui-Gon just used the Force to straight up
here's
cheat
the thing.
him?
In terms of what we've seen in The Phantom Menace, I think it's more of the latter, where Qui-Gon does use every advantage to him. And it's funny, it's like morally quite like he's used the Jedi mind trick the most out of any Jedi, I think. And like that's where you get in debates. Like, he does it to avoid conflict. So is that something that the Jedi should do? Yeah. And like he easily could have stolen the part. You know what's funny? He could have stolen the part, and it would have been the same as if the Jedi mind trick worked, because Republic credits were useless on Tatooine. So he would have taken.
Thing. Why? That this kind of annoyed me too. Like, I feel like they should have known that going into this planet that Republic credits were going to have no value.
But like, you know what's funny? Like, I feel like they could have found people on Tatooine that would have obviously traded with the Republic and the inner core worlds. And I would have just like tried to find someone that would trade whatever their currency is.
Just
exactly. Like, they didn't even try doing that, and I just like that would have been like my first as soon as I heard that Republic credits wouldn't work, I would have been like, there must be somewhere on Tatooine, a Hutt planet. Now, by the way, the Hutts obviously traded with the Republic.
Yeah, obviously.
Trade credits, but that takes away the whole idea of the pod racing. So
Yeah, it was just hand waving to go through with the bet.
Now, a nice thing, I like the pod race. The pod race was really cool.
Of course,
I think
everyone
it was very
says
well
that.
done. Everyone can agree. There's not much I want to say about it, but
everyone
really well
says the two good things about the Phantom Menace are pod racing and Darth Maul's fight.
So another question. So Watto is all upset afterwards because he bet like a ton of money on Sebulba winning, but didn't he get the winnings from the race? Wasn't that the deal?
Yeah, but he's losing his like prodigy slave.
Well, that's true, but all right. So on a more serious note,
First,
go ahead.
First,
Go ahead, Nick.
I'm shocked that there is no lore behind that chance cube. So we don't know whether it was loaded or not.
I've Googled it, but I'm not seeing anything specific.
Yeah, I didn't see anything. All right, go ahead.
So the scene when after they leave, or else, do you guys want to talk about Anakin saying goodbye? Because I don't really care that much. I don't want to shit on a character.
It sets the seeds for Attack of the Clones.
But as soon as they get back to the ship, I thought that the scene with Maul was really weirdly set up. Like, it just seemed odd to me how they're walking, then they're running, then Maul's there. I don't know. It just feels like there was like a missing 30 seconds almost.
I don't.
Unfortunately, I don't recall this one.
I do. I mean, why? What are you saying? Because
I'm saying that the establishing shot for this scene is in a weird place. Like, I feel like the scene should have started 30 seconds earlier with like some recognition that Maul was coming.
I mean, I don't. I think it's more of like a fear-inducing thing the way they brought him, like where it's like a shocking thing, especially for like them. And it's again, this is also
I'm fine with it being shocking. I'm literally saying I think that the shot is just. I don't think the shots line up. I feel like Anakin is like, it feels to me like Qui-Gon has already recognized that Maul is there. Anakin hasn't. But Qui-Gon's still talking like he hasn't realized it, and then he does. It feels like there's dialogue out of place.
I guess so.
It's not even because I'm fine with Maul showing up there. I'm fine with the way the fight works. Everything about that's fine. It's literally like, I think that the first 10 seconds are like weird. There's something off about it, and I've always felt this way every time I've seen this movie.
This is also like one of the most pivotal parts of not only the movie but the prequels, because the Sith have pretty much gone into hiding / exile since, well, in terms it's supposed to be Bane, like where that's where the whole rule of two comes in, where they're always in hiding. So Darth Maul revealing himself is the biggest deal ever, because the Jedi are like, oh no, the Sith are back, and
they don't
that's
even
like,
believe it at first.
Yeah.
Well, no, everything about that's fine. It's literally purely a shot, like a shot construction issue. The editing is weird.
I watched it and I didn't see it, and I watched yesterday and I didn't notice it. At least it didn't affect me.
So specifically, the fight before they leave Tatooine, Mark?
Yes.
The fact that they're running to start that shot?
Yes.
It is a little weird. So that
I'm watching it right now, actually. I was curious, so I pulled it up. I'm looking at it. So you see the shot of Maul getting the information from his scout droids.
Yeah, I know.
And then he puts his hood up.
They're
walking back to the ship, and you just see Maul come up from behind them while they're walking. It makes perfect sense to me.
It doesn't show Qui-Gon being alerted to it, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You mean they were walking, and then you heard the speeder in the back, and then he turned around, and by that point, Maul jumped off, and then he said, "Anakin, get down."
Well, he came up over the horizon, but I guess we're expected to know that they knew that.
I don't know. It's not a big deal, but it's just like this.
It's not a huge deal.
It's this weird editing thing I've always for some reason thought about.
And let me say a compliment of this fight, this first fight. I love how he only uses the single saber, because that makes the reveal of the second saber in the final fight that much better. Mm-hmm. And you mix that in. We'll talk about that scene in detail. But I thought it was brilliant how they decided for Maul's first use of the lightsaber for it to be a single saber. Because when you see him get the double saber out, your jaw drops.
Well, you can tell that he's kind of, that's his ace in the hole, and he's not going to reveal it.
That's what I'm saying, and that's what makes it.
No, I agree. It's good.
Because they easily could have revealed the double saber right now, and it would have taken away a lot from that final scene.
So one thing that I think is interesting, and I mean, not that like it's that different, but I do think that something that's aged about this movie interestingly is because of how much the United States Senate has like become completely non-existent and not able to do anything. It does kind of change how you feel watching this movie today. I'm like, wow, they're just taking shots at Mitch McConnell today. Except, I mean, not really, because this movie was made 15 years ago.
This movie was ahead of its time.
But it definitely, it's like it has kind of made funny of like, wow, the Senate has like, oh yeah, U.S. government kind of same way. Granted, we don't. It's a completely different system. It's a Senate with a Supreme Chancellor or a High Chancellor, and not a president, and shit like that. But it did strike me a little bit today, like, yeah, wow, look at that.
I hated how the politics of these movies were shit on. It was just the dialogue.
Yeah, oh yeah,
the story itself was mostly the overarching plot was fine.
No, it's great. It's bad dialogue.
Like, people are bored by it. I think people just don't want to see complex, and that's what I like about.
I don't think it's that people don't want to see complex. I think it's just that the dialogue was bad, so people harp on it because it's like, I don't like these scenes because they're bad dialogue. But I think with good dialogue and good directing, it could have been a lot better. Although one question I do have: can a non-senator really call for a vote of no confidence?
You're talking about Jar Jar?
No, I'm talking about fake
Padme.
Oh,
fake Padme.
Technically, she's a guest speaker.
She was the representative of Naboo.
I mean, yeah, but...
So we have to think of it like this. Like the United Nations. Normally, the president doesn't represent you in the United Nations. Normally. So, like, it would be as if, like, you had, like, your regular rep of, like, a country, and then, like, the president came in and was like, oh, we want to do this. And, like, it would still legally be...
I know probably technically it's, like, she said it, but Palpatine's probably technically the one on the books having called for it, because, like, the way...
Padme is the ruler of Naboo, so he represents Naboo in that. So, yeah, sure.
I don't know. That was just kind of funny. So... one thing I will also say, and this is where, like, I think that the other thing that people harp on in terms of, like, the politics, I understand the point that they're trying to make about how you have this republic that's this massive Senate chamber, and in the end, because it's so gigantic, you can't get anything done, and the power is going to flow into the bureaucracies and into something like a trade federation that can act instantaneously. The Trade Federation can make an action very quickly. It's going to take forever for the Republic to decide things because you have all these votes and committees and courts and da-da-da-da. And I completely understand that. And I understand the point they're trying to make. I just feel like going with they don't believe an invasion is happening is the wrong way to make that point. Because I feel like an invasion is way too easy to tell if it's happening. Like, to some degree, Cory, you're talking about, like, there should be, like, it's the complexities of all the politics and stuff. I feel like it needed to be something slightly more complicated than to be a invasion. Like, that to me seems very up or down. There either are troops occupying your planet or there aren't. You really need a commission to study that? Like, Qui-Gon
True, but again, we're
Obi-Wan were there. Hey, Qui-Gon, was there an invasion? Yes or no?
This is them coming of an era of, like, 1,000-year peace, so they don't, like, know how to handle something like this.
I get that, but, like, I feel like this seems so... I don't see how anyone can go into a situation and say, we're not sure if there's actually an invasion. Like, I completely could get behind everything the same, but instead of, is there an invasion, like, well... is the Trade Federation actually, I don't know. I think there's a more complex situation that you could actually say, should there be a commission going on? Like, maybe the Trade Federation is, like, jacking up prices in ways to do stuff and force the Naboo into things and, like, all these different things. Like, you could reasonably say, well, we're not actually sure if that's the case. I just feel like there was no invasion. Clear, like, again, like, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon were sent there. How is Qui-Gon not given a report to the Chancellor that's like, they've been invaded? That's the answer.
You know what, Mark? I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I guess that ended.
Mark?
I guess, am I gone?
I think your mic's like cutting out a lot more now.
Okay.
Right?
Hello.
Is that better?
Nick.
Oh,
now-
I don't know
now-
what happened there.
I don't know. Nick, you cut out entirely for me. Corey, I could
Okay.
hear you, but I don't
Yeah.
know.
Did you hear what I said?
I heard, well, Mark, and then you cut off, and I thought it was really
Oh,
funny.
wow.
I thought you were making a joke here. Like, you had something important to say, and then, like, no, I actually don't.
Okay. I wanted to say those droids were on vacation in Naboo.
Ah, okay. Fake news.
Exactly.
If this movie was made today, what are the odds someone would have said fake news?
Exactly. How can you...
Well, Corey, if this was on the CW, what are the odds that there would have been, like, 15 fake news jokes?
Oh my god, 100%. This would have. It's just funny. Like, you're right. This is such like a microcosm of what American politics is now. But this was told in like 1999. It's really funny to see.
The Republic is just as bad as the Empire. Okay? Come on.
Thank you. You know what's so funny? I'm reading a book right now. It's called Bloodlines, and this is actually canon. So I actually could talk about this.
Uh-huh.
And it takes place like about 10 years after the 6th movie, and this talks about politics, about the New Republic. And the New Republic, the one that Leia helped make, is just as incompetent as the Old Republic here. And like,
Well, of course it's incompetent. You can't have a body with 500,000 votes
that's
on
the point.
it.
That's why I'm saying, and I argue this, you need fascism in the Star Wars universe. I'm sorry. Maybe in Earth, it doesn't
Or
make sense.
independence. Why can't the fucking planet just be independent?
Because that's
Which
like
they kind of
talking about
are,
that.
but kind of aren't. I don't know.
No, because like here's the thing: in Star Wars, planets are just countries. Because every planet has one city. Everything is just like a macrocosm of whatever that one city on the planet is. So like, I feel like you just need like because like, especially in Star Wars where every planet is one thing. Like Tatooine is a single desert. Like there's like a forest planet. I don't think planets can like sustain themselves if they didn't have like galactic trading.
Or instead of like, or what if you just like made it into like, you know, instead of it being every planet for himself, every section of planets, you know, turn them into little states.
That's kind of what it is now. There's the core planets. There's the outer rim. You know.
So another thing I will give him, I really do enjoy Palpatine's grin as soon as he is nominated to be his chancellor. I enjoy how it's like it's kind of just a little bit of that facade where it's like this planning that he's been clearly doing for years and years is finally beginning to come together. I'll give him that. I like that he's like supremely happy about it.
Him and Obi-Wan are the two best actors, and like they're the best parts of the prequel. Palpatine, like the actor who plays Palpatine, is phenomenal, like absolutely phenomenal. Especially now, before like stuff goes down, like because he's overly nice. And like, if you didn't watch the trilogy, you never could see that Palpatine was the Star Sidious. Like, that's how good he is.
Yeah, his role wasn't that substantial in this movie quite yet. I mean, obviously it was, but we don't know that in theory. But but yeah, I have no complaints about him. That was definitely one of the best parts of the prequels.
Definitely. So we have the Jedi Council deciding they don't want to train Anakin because he's too old and he's too fearful. Fine. I think it's, you know, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I think it makes some sense. Although I do think that their decision kind of like turns her a little bit on a dime, where it's like Obi-Wan's like, I'm going to do this, and they're like, well, okay, fine, but whatever. We'll talk about that at the end. They go back to Naboo. They go to the Gungan sacred place, and I'm not really entirely sure why the Gungan sacred place is above water, but you know,
Well, the Gundam. Well, actually, that actually is everything. You know, it's funny. I actually like Gundam architecture. I think that's actually like the one thing that's done right with them. So I actually like what the Sacred Temple looks like. It's just.
I just don't understand. I mean, again, the reason is because I feel like they just did the logistics of doing it underwater wouldn't have worked.
I don't think they're like, again. You think they're just purely aquatic. I think they could live both above them because like their city
clearly can live both above and beyond. It just seems
no, but
like
that's also my point too because their city is air. Like it's not like there's water in their city.
Yeah,
so like I think they breathe oxygen all the time anyway. They just happen to be aquatic too.
Now we've kind of left the Gungans alone, but in terms of the Gungans' role in the final battle, and like obviously I don't like it because it's Gungans fighting battle droids, and like I have no reason to care about any of it. But even more so from a purely narrative perspective, what is the point of this battle?
Like you're asking why?
I'm saying they say it's a distraction, but what are they distracting them from?
The blockade.
What blockade?
There's a blockade of Naboo.
That's in the space.
Yeah.
So you have the Gungans fighting battle droids. That draws the battle droids away from the city. At least that's what it seems like they say.
Because they know that the ultimate droid controller is in space, so they need to distract them with the ground army fight.
But again, the fact is they go in with this like small kind of surgical strike team almost. What does drawing all the battle droids away from the city accomplish?
That was the entire idea, just they were keeping guard on their... what were those fighters called? They had a name. The Naboo fighters?
Yeah, Naboo Starfighters.
Was it just a Naboo Starfighter?
Yeah, but you're right. It's the
N1 called the N1 Starfighter.
Okay, gotcha. Were those the only ones that took off?
Yeah,
I think
so. A handful of.
You know what's funny? Like let me just actually give this a compliment to the prequels and more so the Phantom Menace. I love Naboo tech. I love the silver ship they use to fly all around. I love the Naboo starfighters. I think like visually they look completely different than X-wings and Y-wings and all that stuff. And they look royal. They look sleek. They look beautiful. And I think this is an example of doing tech right, where you're not relying on nostalgia visuals from your original trilogy. You're going a completely different direction. And you can say what you will about the prequels. Visually, they look completely different than the original trilogy.
In some places.
It's very creative, very out there, alien world building.
I guess my overall point is, I feel like you have this big whole final battle thing, and the actual meat of going in to get the Viceroy, I think is done really, really well. You have this small group of Naboo defenders kind of fighting their way through the palace, but for the most part, rather than just like blasting their way through, they're trying to find sort of secret passageways, and they go out and they go up on, they use the ascension guns to shoot up through the windows, and it's kind of like this like little strike team, and they know that they're going after the Viceroy. They have a very clearly defined goal, and I actually think that part of it works really well. And I know this has been said a million times, but I have to say it here. Everything else, and obviously the battle with Maul is great, but everything else to me is so meaningless, where it's like the reason they went in to destroy the droid control ship was in order to protect the Gungans from being destroyed in the battle that was being fought in order to draw the droids away from the plane so that they could take off and destroy the droid control ship.
Part of the problem is we're not really aware of the logistics and scale of this blockade and the fighting, because in a way you think it's a much greater than just the capital, but that's really all we're shown.
Well, as Cory kind of said, most planets are basically just a city.
What did you say?
Most planets are basically just a city. They're not like we haven't gotten much.
That's like the point. Like especially like where you really see it too, like in the Clone Wars cartoon, where like if there's like one city under siege, like the entire planet's under siege. Like that's what Star Wars doesn't do right.
Or the fact that they can land on a planet and be like, well, let's check out this canteen that they might be in, when it's like, it's a planet. There should be hundreds and thousands of bars throughout the entirety of the planet.
Yeah.
But
again, that's the point.
I
Planet.
guess it just I feel like it could have been, and this is because like it's, and I mean I guess I made this joke like it's what I also kind of wanted of Rogue One was like these like you don't need a giant battle, like stop it.
No,
Well, Rogue One was needed, and we will talk about.
It really wasn't, but we'll talk about.
No. We're not talking about that now. But in this movie, yes, I feel like you really just needed the Naboo starfighters, and then you just needed the Darth Maul fight. Those are the two things you could have done.
No, I don't think you needed Naboo starfighters. I think you needed the Darth Maul fight and them going to get the Viceroy, and that was it.
I wasn't that upset by the climax, but I think I just feel probably the most popular complaint is just Anakin's role in it felt a little,
Why was Anakin even here to begin with?
Yeah.
This is another moment of like Qui-Gon not acting like himself, where Qui-Gon at multiple points throughout this fight is like, Anakin, find some place to hide. It's like, then why did you bring him here? Like, clearly you didn't want him in the middle of this fight. It wasn't like Anakin stay as close to me as possible so that either I can protect you or you can learn from me. It was like they get into the palace and he's like, find a place to hide and stay there. Stay there. Well, then leave him behind. Like, what was he even on Naboo for? Leave him on fucking Coruscant.
Well, did you like? I'm not going to ask you. Do you like? This is something I liked. Is what I'm about to say. Like, again, the fights emotionally were nothing. I was dead inside watching these fights. Like, you're right. But like again, visually, these fights are like something you've never seen before. Not even just Star Wars, but like just visually. Like the Gundams have really cool weapons. Gungans, whatever. I don't care.
This is not
and like their weapons used against like an army of battle droids. You never see anything like this in anything else.
But
and again,
this is where you and I disagree. I don't give like that does nothing for me. This is like my problems with Game of Thrones on this show. Like, it looks visually cool, but I have no emotional investment in this whatsoever.
I'm talking about in 2017. I feel like the status quo nowadays is to not only do a useless fight where you feel dead inside, but to make it like everything we've ever seen before. So like it's just like a mech fight. It's like you've seen all mech fights. Every mech fight looks the same nowadays. And like I feel like if Phantom Menace was made now, everything would look like Star Wars as we know it, just a little bit different. And like at least this movie decided to go with
little sense the sentence you just said made. I think everything would look like Star Wars does now, except a little different. That doesn't mean anything, Corey.
No, like, instead of a Naboo starfighter looking like what it looks like, it would have looked like an X-Wing, just a little bit more... I don't know.
I agree with Corey. I really appreciate the amount of...
And, like, instead of, like...
I agree that the visuals are good. I'm just saying that it does nothing for me.
I mean, the new... But, well, it might not do anything for you, but it's just... There's a whole new world of lore and technology and different environments and weapons and scenery.
You know, it's really funny to me because like I'm actually seeing this in the new Battlefront game coming out. They had a trailer for the Battlefront game and they showed the different eras of tech like immediately in one shot. And like the first shot was the clones, then the Empire, and then the First Order. And like obviously the Empire and the First Order look exactly the same.
Yeah.
But like at least like the jump between what you see visually from the prequels and the original trilogy is different. So like
I agree that visually everything is like there is a lot to like visually. I'm just saying that like that doesn't excuse the fact that I have absolutely no caring about this battle whatsoever.
Nope.
Yeah, and I literally prefaced you by saying I feel dead inside when I watch it. I'm like watching these like obnoxious aliens throw giant blue goop at droids that are useless
with catapults.
And I'm like, oh, I mean, it looks pretty at least. But again, we're talking, we should be here to compliment what should be complimented and criticize what should be criticized. And I think visually, this is all compliment.
Can I go back to an unrelated scene?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, first, just about that, I liked the Gungan City. I liked the Naboo tech. I liked the droid tech and how they did that. Wasn't really a fan of this battle though. It was a little almost too comical, too much Jar Jar. But one thing we didn't discuss, a scene at least I remember it fondly, was when they were in the underwater ship, and it was like they had the there's always a bigger fish scene. I don't know why, but I really like that scene.
Much earlier.
It was very Star Wars-esque.
Yeah. little cliche for me of like, oh, of
It
course
is,
there's a
but-
giant fish, but yeah, that was fine. And to me, like,
Yeah.
I agree, like that's where, like, if you had Jar Jar in that scene, and that was like he Qui-Gon saves him, they go to the Gungan city, and Jar Jar is like, he's like, all right, Jar Jar will take you through the core to Naboo, and then that was it. Great. He's a funny character. He's a little silly, but you know what? A little silliness is good in that kind of scene with the playing with the bigger fish thing, and you can have Jar Jar fainting because he's like, you know, terrified of the giant fish. Great. But then he has to stay.
Right. Yeah. But the fight didn't do too much for me either. But you know.
So
Yeah, go on.
I was
I was gonna say what I liked about the fight too, the music. Like, I would argue
is one of the greatest pieces.
not.
of
I'm
music.
not talking about Duel of Fates. I'm talking about the music they played during the battle between on the land, like dun, 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 dun. It's such like a unimportant Star Wars song, but it's always in backgrounds of battles, especially in the video games. And that's how I become so accustomed to this music, is because I'm playing like phenomenal games like Knights of the Old Republic, and this is the song that's playing, and I'm like, I'm like, it's so good. And I'm rewatching Phantom Menace, and I'm like, wait a minute, this song is used everywhere in Star Wars now.
Right.
So this score, and it's funny, like I was talking to, like, you know, Mark knows my friend Jesse about this, and especially about Duel of Fates, and we were shocked how a song like Duel of Fates wouldn't win any awards. And like Duel of Fates came out, like, I think the same time the Titanic like song came out, the end of Titanic, and it's like, man, like, look at the competition they had back then. I feel like Duel of Fates got like cheated out of something at least. It's so iconic.
Now that you mentioned the music, I do remember liking the scene when they were unloading the droid arm.
Yeah, that's what exactly the scene I was talking about, where like it's just, it feels intense. The music complements everything so well, and like that's, I'd say if I were to give anything in this movie like a perfect 10 out of 10, it would be the score.
All right, so now, speaking of score, moving into Duel of Fates and the fight between Maul and Qui-Gon Obi-Wan. And while I understand why some people talk about sort of the over-choreographedness, one thing I did absolutely love was there's one moment where Obi-Wan kind of fakes forward and then comes back, and then Qui-Gon attacks, and I thought that was just an amazing piece of fight choreography, because it was that one thing that kind of hinted at, like, well, clearly Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon have fought a lot together, and they kind of can intuit each other's motions, and it was just like, I thought it was a really cool fake. I really like that exact specific piece of the fight.
I never bought into the whole over choreography. You know, I argue this. When you have Jedi Masters and Sith Lords, like, these are the top of the top for each of them, you're going to have fights that are all about parrying and feet movement. And the Force obviously improves your ability to jump and move around and to predict. So this is exactly what I imagined when I imagined what lightsaber fights are. And I feel like ever since Phantom Menace, lightsaber fights were never like the original trilogy again. In the original trilogy, you never had a fight that wasn't swing, counter, swing, like sword, like whatever, blah, blah, blah.
They got
This
better.
is the movie that set the flag bearing of what lightsaber fights have become for Star Wars, period. Like, this is, like, it's used in every medium. This is what people think of when they think of lightsaber fights. Not,
Well, that's
yeah.
The idea is that it's another thing George Lucas was trying to introduce to us. Is a really powerful, seasoned Jedi and Sith fighting each other. But I guess it's not so much that I didn't like it. It's just, if you compare this fight to the fights in the third movie, I think those are clearly like better. It's just they got it perfect, I think, in the third one.
Yeah, I would agree that I think that they took some time to figure out exactly what style they wanted to go with a high choreographed lightsaber duel. I think that this is fine. It doesn't bother me, but I would agree that the fights in Revenge of the Sith are better. So,
And the music makes it.
Mhm.
It's really, that's what makes it iconic for me.
so-
Very memorable, especially when he's deploying the lightsaber, that first opening.
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah,
and as
it's
somebody
good.
who played it on a saxophone, that Joe Fates is just great music.
I mean, I would argue that Duel of Fates is the best Star Wars. Like, obviously, like in terms of being iconic, you got the Imperial March, you have, this Tatooine song when Luke's looking over, but of course, no one's gonna question that. But like, I think in terms of complexity and adding emotion to a scene, like pure emotion to like something where like that's all it was doors opening, and like it's just like it took whatever you were feeling, and you were probably excited for the fight anyway because Maul is just amazing, and it just enhances it. This is what music should do in movies: is take something basic and turn it into like something that transcends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Everything about Duel of Fates is great. So now we're going to move into a section we're going to talk about, which is shitty Anakin line, because there are a lot of shitty Anakin lines throughout the prequels, and the line I want to go with in terms of being a really shitty line from Anakin is when he's in the starship and he's out in space, and R2 tells him to go back, and he says, Qui-Gon told me to stay in this ship, so that's what I'm going to do. And it's like, shut up, Anakin. That is not in any way what he told you to do.
Why was there a child-sized space helmet in a Naboo starfighter?
Because Anakin's the chosen one, so someone left it there just for him.
There are a lot of I hate Anakin, and you know what? Like, I get it. I know exactly what George Lucas was thinking. I'm in his head. In New Hope, he was the best starfighter pilot in the galaxy and a good friend. You didn't have to show him being the best freaking starfighter pilot at 8 years old. I'm so angry, Mark. I can't get it. It's so stupid.
Well, it just that line just bothered me. I was just like, really? Like, clearly, it's one thing if you want to say like, no, they need my help, and be like, I'm going to be super selfless because I'm Jesus. But like, really, you're going to go with I can't not fight here. Qui-Gon told me to stay in the ship. That was just, I hated that line. I really didn't like the Anakin blowing up the droid control ship. Like, it was too forced. It was too much. Oh, we need to have the hero trust, kind of gets lucky and blows up the big starship because that's what A New Hope was. But like, A New Hope didn't feel like pure luck. This felt like pure luck. He had no idea what he was doing, and he just did it. And
you know what it bothers me because this stuff is going on. Like Anakin flying the starfighter, and then Jar Jar leading the freaking ground troops. And they always cut away from it during the Duel of Fates, and it really pulls because you see what you just said, exactly what you just said with Anakin taking off, and then immediately it cuts back to Duel of Fates, like and you remember how and then they cut back to the fight outside, and you see simultaneously the droids fall, and you see what's going on in space, and I just wish the fight, the Duel of Fates, was uninterrupted because it was such a emotionally you were so hooked into it, and it was the best thing going on, and they ruined it by cutting to the other subplots.
I said, you just needed Duel of Fates and them taking the Viceroy, and
exactly.
You just remove the other two things altogether, and it's so much better. Yep.
That's Phantom Menace. If we could have a tagline of this podcast, it would be so much better if they didn't do if you took Jar Jar out, if you took the kids out, if you took away the 5 subplots at the end. This really could have been a really good movie. This
could have been a very good 90-minute movie.
Because there's so much.
Unfortunately, it was 2.5 hours.
There's so much.
Can we also talk about that? Why was this movie 2.5 hours?
Well, they needed all this crap, apparently.
Nothing happened.
So do you guys think there'd be a better age for Anakin in this movie?
What?
No, because I think Anakin's fine. I agree he's a little generic, and I agree that maybe his childhood might be a little bit the yippies are a little bit too much. I just think that if you left Anakin on Coruscant when they went back to Naboo, it just okay. There you go. Now you don't have to worry about what to we need to give Anakin something to do in this fight because then Anakin's not there, and who cares? But I feel like this movie at times tried so hard, was like, well, people are watching these movies because they want to see the origin of Darth Vader, so Anakin needs to basically be in every scene. It's like, no, he doesn't.
And I also feel like they tried to make this movie for all ages. They tried to make it for little babies, and they had Jar Jar in there. Tried to make it for little.
They had him in, yeah.
They tried to have little kids like that were like anywhere between 8 to 12, so they had Anakin. And they tried to make it for people that grew up in the 80s watching the trilogy, so you got like the Maul, and they really tried to appeal to every age group possible.
They tried to have their Ewoks.
Yeah. But just way worse. So now we can talk about the death of Maul. Now I know Maul is not technically dead, and there are some extended universe stuff that goes further on this.
Of course.
And I also understand that if I start criticizing Count Dooku, Cory's gonna like have a conniption.
Well,
But if we look at the films exclusively, which is what Lucas was trying to do. This wasn't an integrated world yet where it was like you have to do homework and read all the extended universe stuff. That was extended and not really for here. I think that Maul is probably one of the most disappointing things in all of this. Because if Maul didn't look cool and have a cool lightsaber, would anyone care about his existence whatsoever?
But that's it. Like, why is Boba Fett so popular?
I have no idea. By the way, I've never liked Boba Fett. He is a guy with a name. Cool. But that's whatever.
Maul serviced what he had to service. So, him being the apprentice of Sidious and doing all his bidding, he was virtually just another Darth Vader, if you think about it. He was the enforcer that carried out the Emperor's, orders. He was Vader. Vader mentioned he didn't talk as much. But, like, the thing with... This is what... I will agree with you. Like, sure, I've learned to accept what they decided to go for, and as you and I both know, it's explained a lot better in cartoons and books and every other medium that's not the movies. So we're talking about the movies, so I will not mention the Clone Wars cartoon. I will not mention the plenty of books that talk about these characters in much greater depth or anything else. So let's talk about it from a movie standpoint. If we're just talking about movies, I think killing off Maul was the biggest mistake you ever could have done, because Maul would have been such a perfect thing to kill Qui-Gon, have Obi-Wan have his emotional grief, blah 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 blah, and have this follow all the way to the third movie. And instead of being in a situation where Dooku is on his knees and about to get executed, you could have Obi-Wan there on the ship, and you could see Obi-Wan witness Anakin killing Maul, the person who killed his own master. There's so much more poetic justice in seeing stuff like that carries out through 3 movies than killing off Maul in this movie and then having Dooku who gets introduced. And that's nothing against Dooku. Dooku's actor is phenomenal.
But a terrible character in the movies.
Yeah,
in the films, Dooku is awful.
Yeah. And it's a shame because even in the movies, they explain his backstory just via dialogue that he's a former Jedi Master, the former Master to Qui-Gon. And you know what? Then we should have done it like this. Dooku should have been in this movie instead. And then it would have been cool to see Dooku kill Qui-Gon, his former student. Like, both of those would have been acceptable, but they didn't. They half-assed it. They half-assed backstory, and, it is what it is.
Well, Cory and I talk a lot about, like, certain universes' failure to commit. And this, to me, feels like such a failure to commit here, where it's like, obviously we know at some point Anakin needs to become the apprentice. And we'll talk in a bit, because I want to talk a little bit about, like, just prequels in general here. But we understand that we understand that, like, okay, Maul is not going to survive to the end of this whole trilogy. But it just feels like such a missed opportunity with a character who obviously looks really cool. He has basically three lines in the entirety of this. Like, he says basically nothing. We know nothing about him. And it bothers me because it's such a missed opportunity where you have one of the most powerful characters we've ever seen in Star Wars. Like this incredible fighter who's got these amazing moves and this really cool lightsaber. And I wish it was expanded upon. And instead it just isn't. And then I understand, like, yeah, there's a moment of Obi-Wan killing the guy who killed his master, but it's like that happened 30 seconds ago. That happened a couple of minutes ago in stream time. Like, what? There's so much less emotional weight as opposed to, like, they could have fought multiple times and there could have been this back and forth where Obi-Wan is looking for justice and Obi-Wan is trying to decide, should I kill him, should I not kill him? And then added to that, it adds in this Anakin is now kind of being raised, and that Anakin has witnessed multiple fights maybe where Obi-Wan is trying to kill him. And then maybe Obi-Wan realizes, you know what? That's not the Jedi way. I shouldn't actually just kill him on the spot. But instead Anakin has been raged on this raise, and he also has a sort of belief in Obi-Wan, and he sort of still has this, this revelation for him, and he ends up killing him. Like, I think, Cory, you're completely right that it would have been a lot better. And it doesn't help that Dooku is such a bad character within the two movies that he's in, because he doesn't do anything. It's just like he shows up, it's like, oh, he's the new apprentice. Great. He fights them. He wins. He leaves. The next movie he gets killed. Like, he doesn't actually do anything. And I know that he actually does do a ton of stuff with the Separatists and throughout the sort of the in-betweens of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. But because we don't get to see any of it, it's just completely lost. And it's
so funny too, because we'll talk about visuals of the prequels. Like, to the prequels, Maul is the most iconic character in the prequels. Period. He's the Darth Vader of the prequels. Even in the new Battlefront game, when you see the Clone War era stuff, where you see the droids versus you see Maul leading them, not Dooku. So, like, obviously the franchise knows who's the most popular character out of the prequels is, and it's not Count Dooku, it's Darth Maul, because Darth Maul visually is like nothing we've ever seen before. He's, in lore, the only character with a double-edged lightsaber. He's so unique. Dooku is just a random white guy.
I thought there was a guy in one of the old Republic games, one of the Jedi.
We're talking about the movies. If you want to talk about expanded universe, yeah, Mark, I can tell you a lot of double-edged lightsaber users.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. In Star Wars lore, there's one man with this aesthetic, with this lightsaber. It's Darth Maul. He is by far and away the most popular thing that come out of the prequels, bar none. I don't think there's anything besides Darth Maul, maybe the Clone Troopers. Everyone looks fondly on the Clone Trooper aesthetic. But, like, that's it. And, like, it's just such a shame because, again, I'm going back to, like, how 3 could have been, where, like, you, as Mark said, you could have had it where they're always having confrontations. Obi-Wan, finally, Maul is defeated, and Obi-Wan's like, Anakin, don't kill him. Keep him alive. We have to give him trial. It's a Jedi. And then Dooku says, not Dooku, Palpatine says, do it. And then he does it. And then that's like right there's just a powerful moment because Obi-Wan's the one telling him to spare him because it's his former master. And you have Anakin be the one that kills him. It's just like so much better. Oh my God. We're fan crafting right now.
That is a lot of extrapolation on what could happen, though. The thing is, Dooku is purely why he kind of sucks, from a movie experience, is because he's purely like a political and lore character almost, whereas Maul could be because we at least think of him as young, and he could be a representation of the dark side.
It's funny too because like you actually couldn't tell the story unless you did it the way they did it because Dooku is such a natural. And Mark knows this more because Nick. I'm assuming you've watched Clone Wars, the cartoon, right?
It's actually, unfortunately, I didn't.
Well, I highly recommend it to not only you, Nick, but everyone that likes Star Wars. I think the Clone Wars cartoon is some of the best of the Star Wars medium as a whole.
I can recommend it too. I think it is very good.
I did watch Mark, it on TV way back in the day, but it's been a while.
But anyway, like Mark can see it. Dooku is needed. Dooku is the leader of the Separatists and the Confederacy of Planets, and he's someone you can't have Maul in this position. Right, so like it's like that's why it's a shame because if they did commit to this and they killed Maul off, I wish they dove more into Dooku, where you could see Dooku as a former Jedi Master who's
But like,
set up.
If the idea is that if Dooku is 100% necessary for this kind of a story, then Maul shouldn't even have existed. Like,
No, I'm okay with there being a brute Sith that's just there to execute Palpatine's
Or then
wishes.
you get into the problem of the rule of two is just kind of
Yeah,
limited.
and then there's a
where
rule
it's
of two.
You don't. If you didn't have the rule of two, then you could have had all three of them, and it works.
But that's the thing.
We're getting mired.
Well,
so I want to steer things back towards the end. So we'll get into our ratings in a minute. But there's one thing I want to talk about, and this is kind of in terms of prequels in general, not just the prequels for Star Wars. Do you guys think that it is possible to tell a story that is a prequel in which we have and by prequel I mean one in which we truly do know exactly where the story is going to end?
So you're asking, like, is this a form of storytelling that's sustainable, that we know that Anakin becomes Vader and that these characters survive and most likely these characters die?
Because I think that there are some serious, like, at times it creates a problem where we know it. Because, and I see this a lot in Clone Wars, which I highly recommend. I think it's very good. But the one complaint I have with it is at times it feels like they run into this serious problem of we want to have this really exciting scene where we're not sure what's going to happen, and yet you're like, wait a minute. Well, I know 100% that character's in episode 3, so clearly they don't die. Like, clearly they're just there. And I feel like that kind of creates a problem here, where it's like, we know Anakin's going to become the apprentice, so we know that Maul is going to die at some point. We don't know he's exactly going to die here, but, like, we know all of these things are going to happen. And, like, we know that Palpatine is, you know, is going to become evil. Like, so we kind of know that it's like, we should... Like we're on call. Do you think that is sustainable through a franchise like this, or do you think that it just has inherent problems that will always come about?
No, I think it's 100% sustainable. I think it's about the destination and not the journey and not the destination. I think Clone Wars is a prime example of you being able to tell truly deep and complex stories, knowing full well the characters are going to make it. And there's still drama that exists, It's a kind of a thing where I agree where you could have taken out a lot of fights, especially, and this is where Attack of the Clones fails so much, because all Attack of the Clones was an attempt to do suspenseful drama in like attacks and fights and all that stuff, and all of that falls on its face. But like at least in Phantom Menace, you had like a backdrop, politics and
I think Phantom Menace gets away with it a little bit because it's the one with the least, like, really the only characters we're like 100% sure are going to survive are like Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Yoda. Like, they're basically the only characters from the original trilogy that are in this movie. It gets worse as we move forward, but I'm kind of like, to some degree, I feel like, and there's no way to do this unless you could find a way with someone who's never seen Star Wars before and knows nothing about it. Would, for example, Clone Wars be better if I didn't know Anakin was Darth Vader?
Say it again?
Would the sort of seeing the rise and fall of Anakin, would that be better if I didn't know that he was Darth Vader?
I don't think it's a problem for prequels. It's just prequels succeed as movies in different ways. Like, it's supposed to be almost more of like an inevitable Greek tragedy. Mm-hmm. And we're just watching. It is about the journey, and that makes the ending that we know is coming more powerful. It would be a very different movie, I think, if we didn't know what was happening. So that's hard to say.
I guess I just feel like I'm kind of playing devil's advocate because I think that there is a way to do it. And I think what Nick said is the exact right thing, that it has to be like very much about the journey, and it has to, like, having an air of inevitability almost works. I just feel like there are times when the prequels kind of like are not entirely sure which side they want to be on. And like there are moments where they lay it on very thick of like, well, we know, yes, that's where we're going. And then there are times where it feels like they're trying to like play it a little bit straighter. And that to me is kind of an across the board theme that we'll analyze as we go through all the prequels. All right. So with that, we're at the like hour and 40-minute mark. So we're gonna wrap this thing up and get into our rating scale. So if you have never joined a Thoughts from Aunt Woo chat before, you will a quick explanation of the rating scale. We rate things between 0s and 10s. For the first time, we are not rating against all of television, because this is not television. We are rating against, I guess, all of movies. But, you know, basically the same thing. A 5 being an average movie that you would see, a 0 being terrible, a 10 being perfect. The way I look at a 5 is, if something's a 5, you would see it. You probably wouldn't turn it off, but you're probably not seeking it out either. You consider sort of your average movie that you would go see. So, without further ado, let's start things off. Cory, final thoughts and your rating for The Phantom Menace.
The Phantom Menace is one of those movies that's very frustrating, and this is coming from... I'm like a superstar. Like, let me give you some backstory in terms of my feelings on Star Wars. Like, Star Trek is my favorite medium of all time. Star Wars, especially recently to me, is pulling like that void up. Like, Star Wars, I love. I'm obsessed with Star Wars, and I love what the Phantom Menace represents as a whole. And I'm someone that is rating differently than a lot of the average people, because I'm someone that read the books, and I'm someone that watched the cartoons and played the video games. So every form of storytelling Star Wars has to offer, I have experienced, and I appreciate the prequels and the Phantom Menace for shooting off the prequels by introducing me to this world. And I appreciate a lot I'm going to talk about the positives right now. I appreciate how George Lucas decided to go the completely different direction with his very successful Star Wars trilogy. And I feel like nowadays, this is an art that's lost. I feel like there's no risk anymore. I feel like if you're doing something of a franchise that existed, when this came out, this was over 12 years, I think, or 13 years since the last Star Wars movie was seen, you're going to want to go with a lot of what people recognize and feel comfortable with, and you're not going to really... You're going to see more soft reboots, like what Force Awakens is, versus just something like just a whole new direction. And I feel like the prequels represent a whole new direction and risk-taking. And the reason I think the prequels fall on its face and are hated are because of simple things. That, like, how did this make it through? Like, Jar Jar Binks is such an example of how did Jar Jar Binks get green-lighted. He could have been there, and you could have gotten rid of him so quickly, and a lot of issues in the story would have been dissolved without Jar Jar. And, like, just issues with the horrible kid actors, and these are, like, rookie mistakes. And, like, it's just such a shame, because there's so many diamonds scattered throughout this movie that are just hidden under all this crap that shouldn't even be there to begin with. And I will say, this is some of the best music in a Star Wars movie I've ever heard. This offers the best lightsaber fight, in my opinion, in the franchise. It offers very memorable characters. I think Qui-Gon's phenomenal. I think Obi-Wan is great. I think Maul is very memorable. I think there's a lot riding on this movie, and I feel like it's just overshadowed by just the reputation it's developed, and by the things that truly are bad are horrible. And it really does weigh down a lot of the brilliant stuff, I would say, that's in this movie. So if I'm rating against all of movies here, The Phantom Menace gets a great 5. It is average, because I'm giving it average because I have seen a lot worse than Phantom Menace, and I have seen a lot better than Phantom Menace. And I think the good is brilliant, like 9s and 10s brilliant, and the bad is like 1 and 2 bad. So when you take like those averages, it gets a 5.
All right, Nick?
Yeah, I was thinking of 5 too. This is actually might be the toughest one to rate, because I'm a little more certain what I think of the other two. My opinion is a little different, because I think there's clear good and bad, although I don't know if there's anything spectacular, and I don't know if there's... Well, actually, now that I think about it, there is some pretty good and there is some pretty bad. So, but it's just, I don't know. It's hard, because there is just so much central stuff that is really bad, but there's so much stuff you almost got to give them props for. Like, so much of the supporting stuff, the world building, the music. I don't know. But I guess just because of that uncertainty, I'd have to also give it a 5. But it's because part of me wants to go under that. But on the other hand, if we're talking about all of movies, well, I'm thinking kind of like a 4.5, but I guess I'll stick with a 5.
All right, I'm gonna go lower. I'm gonna give this a 3.5. I think this is definitely like significantly below average. I think that the bad really does outweigh the good. And I think that, like, to me, like, Cory's kind of right that there's a whole bunch of stuff that you could remove and it would be a lot better. And it's kind of like, it comes out to that, like, if you remove Jar Jar, if you remove some of the really bad Anakin stuff, if you, like, fixed some of the, like, serious structural problems, I could easily bump this movie up, like, between 4 and 5 points, which would put it around a 7, 5, and 8, which is really good. And I think that that's about a fair way to look at this. Like, to me, I'm taking off the points for what's really bad. I don't think that, like, there's a perfect structure under this. I don't think that, like, it's this perfect movie that if you just took out a few of the bad scenes, it would be, you know, a 9 or a 10. But there is good under there. And that's why it's not, like, atrociously bad. But I think this is significantly below average because there's just so many problems with it that are just, like, really obvious to me. And to me, like, obvious problems hurt more than, like, subtler ones. Like, okay, I understand that sometimes there are just subtle things that don't work about your story, and okay, it's problematic, but I don't have a good way to change it. To me, there's this is a first draft of a movie, and you know what? A first draft shouldn't have made it on screen, especially for, like, one of the most iconic franchises in movie history. And I'm just not willing to tolerate it. And because Cory has made me watch Clone Wars, I'm finally seeing, like, there's glimmers of hope, but those glimmers of hope are made so much worse by the fact that, like, oh, it could have been good. There is a possibility that these characters could have been in a good story, and they're just not.
Yeah, what you said, 3.5 is probably what it deserves. It's just, I guess, it's a mix of nostalgia.
I understand
and
that there's some nostalgia
Yeah.
there, and the music, like, the music really is so good that I understand, like, a desire to bring it up a few points. But, like, to me, that's where it is. It's not as bad as what we're going to talk about next week. I think Attack of the Clones is significantly worse.
Yeah.
However, that's what I'm going to say. So, thank you guys for tuning in. This was pretty long. We're almost at the 2-hour mark. But we'll be doing this for all of the Star Wars movies and potentially Clone Wars and maybe Rebels if I get to it. I don't know. We'll see. So if you like this, give us a follow. You can follow the whole show on @antwoo_pod. That's our Twitter. You can follow Cory at his new Twitter handle. I can't even point to that, wherever it is. At Grand Moff Curry. It's a pretty entertaining name. You can follow me on Twitter at stack_mode. You can check out all the fabulous content from Thoughts from Antwoo, our Avatar podcast, where we do deep dives just like this, only, you know, a lot more in depth because, you know, they're 20-minute episodes and we go about this long. Well, not usually this long, but you get my point. You can check out Felicity and Friends, our CW chat, where Cory and I complain about Flash or praise Arrow, depending on the week. And you can check out some Hearthstone stuff. There's tons of fun stuff. So check out the website, thoughtsfromantwoo.com. All the stuff is there. Link will be in the description. And we will see you guys soon.